This is Beat the Closing Line.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Beat the Closing Line. I am your host, Nicole Russo, alongside one of our resident NFL analysts for TheLines.com, Eli Hershkovich. As you know, every Thursday, we have a special guest on this podcast to give us a fresh perspective on sports betting, as well as how the NFL season is going. Today, we're going to be talking to TA, who is a professional sports bettor focusing on NFL betting markets. TA, thanks for joining us today. How is it going?
It's good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I can't believe it's week 4 already. I know everyone says stuff like that, but it really is crazy. I thought, feels like yesterday we were just talking about the kickoff of the season. So already a month into it. So I'm ready to talk about these games and look forward to the rest of the season.
Awesome. We are so excited to have you on here with us today. And as always, before we get into our betting topics, make sure you hit the like button on this YouTube video. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe so that you know every time we post a new video. And if you are listening to us where you get your podcasts, especially on Apple Podcasts, make sure to give us a 5-star review and subscribe to the pod for your chance to win a $25 Amazon gift card. With all that being said, it's time to get into the questions. Eli, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so TA, you've been tweeting out some great stuff over at CleveTA, CLEVTA on Twitter, at CleveTA. And specifically for this Bengals Dolphins Thursday night football game, the line opened at, I want to say Sunday night, betting markets opened at Bengals minus 2.5, quickly got bet up to Bengals minus 3. Now it's sitting at Bengals minus 3.5, total around 46.5, 47. Dolphins obviously on the field for a ton of plays against the Bills in that 21-19 win against Buffalo on Sunday. Bengals offense seemed to be moving at a better rhythm at the Jets. Granted, it's the Jets, but regardless, Cincy's offense seemed to be more in a flow. What do you make of this Thursday night football game and any bets for you on the card?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned the line movement because a lot of people are the ones that maybe don't bet for a living or don't even pay attention. They're sitting there wondering why in the world are the Bengals favored by over a field goal? Maybe Miami should be favored here or should be a really short line. And that's there's a lot of things missing there when they look at it just from that perspective. I think for one, obviously the Tua question mark in terms of was he going to play? It sounds like he will, but even then, did he have a concussion or did he have a back injury? We don't know, right? That's the mystery. So there's clearly some question mark just in regards to his health. But then the other factor is the short turnaround. It has been kind of well documented that the Dolphins played a ton of plays on defense last week, 90 plays on the field. It was sweltering heat. Clearly both teams between them and Buffalo were guys were getting, getting cramps throughout the game, needed IVs afterwards. It took a major toll on their bodies, and to turn around so quickly on a Thursday night, it's just a very rare instance that we see something like that. And so I did tweet out and I've talked about it a couple of times, but, in terms of teams that have had to play 90 plays on defense and then play a short week the next week. It's only happened twice that I can see since 2000. We've seen the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2016, came off an OT game against the Raiders and then played the Falcons on a Thursday night. And they did this at home, by the way. They allowed the Falcons to score 43 points, got blown out. The second instance I found was the 2020 New Orleans Saints came off of a 90-plus game against the Chiefs at home and then played on Christmas Day against the Vikings on a Friday, again, at home. So, both home games, and they allowed 33 points to the Vikings. So, again, tiny sample size, but even when we look at, just normal turnaround times, Sunday to Sunday, we've seen that defenses allow their opponents to go over their team total about 63% of the time. It's happened 24 times since 2000. So, again, small samples, but I think you combine that trend or those, data points with just, you step back and logically, like these teams are tired. These players are exhausted. It's hard to play football in general. Then when you add in all those plays well above the norm in terms of plays on the field, add in all that heat. It was a tough game against a really good offense in Buffalo. Like, it's just natural that there should be some sort of letdown or just some sort of stamina issue with the Miami defense. So I personally do like the Cincinnati team total over if you can get less than 27. I got it at 25.5. I think it's sitting at 26 or 26.5 in spots. I think it's good. But then also, just the separately from the trends, Joe Burrow has struggled obviously with his offensive line and creating pressure. The Dolphins have been bottom 5 in pressure rate this season. They do not do a good job of getting to the quarterback. Their type of defense that they play, they run some of that cover zero where they do all out blitzes, really lends to what Joe Burrow likes to attack. He kills those all out blitzes. The defense for Miami is bottom 10 when you look at all the advanced metrics. The only reason they look better on the surface is because they've created a ton of turnovers. So from an EPA perspective, they've created the 9th most EPA just from turnovers alone. Otherwise, they're one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Now, granted, they played a tough schedule, but I just think that this is a good spot for Joe Burrow in this offense, and just obviously the Miami defense has a good shot to struggle with that quick turnaround.
Moving over to the Chargers. This team is much more banged up now that we're heading into week 4 as they take on the Texans in Houston. So you have defensive end Joey Bosa, who was recently placed on the IR, and you have that Justin Herbert injury, which was a key factor in a very poor performance in a blowout loss against the Jags. Right now, the spread is down to Chargers -5 and the total sitting at 44. Can you give us some insight into this matchup?
Yeah, I took Houston right away when it was at 6, and then it dropped down to 4.5, and it's bounced back and forth between 4.5 and 5.5 the last day or two. I just anticipated the Rashawn Slater injury, which is a really big issue for the Chargers, separate from the Justin Herbert issue. One of the best left tackles in the NFL. He's out for the season now with a bicep injury. His backup is Storm Norton, who's one of the worst tackles in the NFL the last handful of years. When you look at some of the pass blocking metrics, he actually allowed 9 pressures last week when he came in for Rashawn Slater, which is just a gigantic number. I don't think Slater allowed 9 pressures for the entire season going into last week. So it's a huge drop off. I'm not sure. I'm not totally convinced that Justin Herbert's going to play in this game. Again, I have no inside info, just my 2 cents. He really struggled last week after getting shot up pregame. He didn't play well. He obviously didn't respond well in practice if they initially thought that he wasn't going to play on Friday. So I'm not sure why you would throw him out there. His performance, obviously he struggled last week, but then also now you've got your left tackles out. You've got Corey Linsley, their starting center, one of the best centers in the NFL, who didn't play last week. He may miss another game this week. We'll see. You might have your 2 best offensive linemen out. Like, why put your quarterback at risk, your franchise quarterback? So we'll see what happens. But, if he is announced out by chance, I think this line gets to maybe, Chargers -1 or 2, or even a pick 'em with Chase Daniel at quarterback. And then you've got great line value. And I think in general, also Joey Bosa's out on defense. We don't know about JC Jackson. It's just a very beat up team. In general, Houston's played much better at home, especially Davis Mills in his 1.5 years of action. He's got 14 touchdowns, 1 interception in his career at home. The Texans actually have covered 3 straight home games, just way better from a split perspective. And actually, his best game that he's had in his young career was last year against the same Chargers team. So, I think he fares well against this Chargers team that doesn't blitz a lot. He struggles mightily against the blitz. 30th out of 33 quarterbacks, according to PFF this season, while he's the 6th best quarterback when not facing a blitz. So I think from that perspective, he's got a good shot of playing well and covering any number that's over a field goal, especially with this banged up Chargers team. And, who knows, you might get some really good value if Herbert does end up sitting here.
Moving over east, you mentioned offensive line play, and your Cleveland Browns, TA, have dominated on the ground this season with Chubb and Hunt. They opened as 3-point favorites on the road in Atlanta, but that line has ticked down to -1, -1.5, total around 48.5, 49 at some shops. Would you consider throwing Atlanta into a teaser leg, maybe a team total over with the Browns, or full game over in general? How are you looking to play this game?
Yeah, I personally, so I have from before the season, I took a couple of future lines, and I had the Browns at pick 'em here a couple of weeks before the season started. I thought it was just a wrong number. It was sitting 4.5 in other spots, so it was a rogue number. But I would wait to see if Myles Garrett plays. He's gotten that car accident, and thankfully he's okay, but we'll see if he plays or not. I think it's kind of a 50-50 proposition. If he plays, I like the Browns here at anything under a field goal. I would consider a teaser leg, although with Atlanta's defense, there's plenty of, you run this, play this game 100 times. There's plenty of scenarios where the Browns just run it down their throat and Atlanta doesn't see the ball enough to cover even a teaser leg. So I'd be careful there. they still, their offense has surprised. Although before the season started, I had them getting 5.5 in week 1 against the Saints, and I noted that this was the team that I actually upgraded the most in the preseason based upon what I saw. Really liked what Mariota was doing with Arthur Smith's offense. A lot of play action, really fitting to his strengths with the RPO game. Drake London was obviously, he's playing well. Kyle Pitts is playing well. Cordell Patterson is a kind of Swiss Army knife. So they've got weapons on offense. Their defense is still really bad. Dead last in the NFL defending the run from an EPA perspective. The Browns are number 1 on offense, and they're just ramming it down opponents' throats. So, there could be a scenario where the Browns just run and never give the ball up. So from an over perspective, that can hurt things if they're just running clock constantly. And from a teaser perspective, like if Atlanta just doesn't get the ball, or if they make a mistake or two, and the Browns, the Browns are the best in the NFL at getting to the red zone and scoring. So they do convert a lot. So I'd be careful there. Like I said, I think if Myles Garrett plays, I feel really comfortable taking the Browns here at less than a field goal. If he doesn't play and Jadeveon Clowney is out again, then, maybe the teaser leg is okay from that perspective. But take a look at that injury report on Friday, especially to see if Garrett's going to play.
We're going to stick with your Browns for one more second here. Maybe you wouldn't take them to win the Super Bowl at the futures market right now at, I believe they're at 50-1, but what do you make of their long-term outlook for this team? Would you potentially bet them at plus 120 to make the playoffs?
What I would do, honestly, is wait to see what happens after this game. You might not get a much worse number. It might be, closer to plus 110 or so. We'll see. But I would see what happens here. My goal all along when looking at the schedule after the Deshaun Watson suspension was announced, they needed to get to 3-1 at least in the first 4 games. It's the easiest schedule in the NFL the first 4 weeks, and then it gets much tougher. Now the problem, the good news is the next 2 games after this, at home versus the Chargers and the Patriots, went from 2 difficult games where you would have been an underdog to the Chargers and close to pick'em versus the Patriots, to now you might actually be favored in both games with the Herbert and all the Charger injuries, and then with Mac Jones's injuries. So they went from maybe having a couple tough games to you could win both of those games and go to 5-1 if you win this week against Atlanta. So I think I would just wait, because if they lose this game, I really have a hard time seeing them make the playoffs for the rest of the season. But if they win this game against the Falcons, even at if you can get a plus number, I think you'd still get a plus number even at 3-1. I would consider taking them for sure. Deshaun Watson comes back at the end of the season against teams like the Saints and the Commanders, who many thought could surprise. Both have struggled, and maybe they're worse than what we imagined. And having Deshaun Watson on your roster makes those games much more winnable. So I think there's definitely value after this week.
TA, staying in the AFC, but going over to the AFC West, the Raiders opened as a 1-point favorite over the Broncos at home. It was steamed up to 2.5, must-win game for Las Vegas after starting 0-3, and the Raiders go 2 of 6 in the red zone. McDaniels plays pretty conservatively overall too in that game. Denver, though, was outgained in yards per play against the 49ers. So are you considering taking Vegas as under a field goal in a big spot, or is this line inflated to you?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I have Denver at 3. There was like a random 3 that popped yesterday for like 5 minutes, and I grabbed it immediately, and then it dropped back down to 2.5. And so, I would, if I were going to take Denver, I'd just kind of sit and wait. Maybe you can get a 3 and maybe 120 max there, but I don't really understand this love for the Raiders. I've actually faded them. This is going to be my 3rd straight week I've faded the Raiders, and I've gone 2-0 luckily, and hopefully 3-0 here. I think they stink. I know a lot of people have talked about this in the offseason, so I'm not the only one. I wrote up a big preview for all NFL teams and talked about how the Raiders were the most fraudulent 10-7 team you'll ever see. Well, the only 10-7 team, right? Because it was the first 17-week season, but 10-win team. They were minus 65 in point differential, which is essentially equivalent to a 7-win team, more than a 10-win team. That 3-win overperformance led the NFL by a mile. They were 7-2 in 1-score games. They got lucky breaks down the stretch to make the playoffs. They faced the Colts when Carson Wentz that week had COVID. And they allowed him to play, and he played terribly. They played the Browns team ravaged by COVID. They had to start Nick Mullins. They had to move that game, if you remember, to a Monday night. And then they played Drew Lock in place of an injured Teddy Bridgewater. So they got all the breaks. This is not a real playoff team. Like if we would have looked at them as if they were a 7-win team last year, I don't think people would be looking at them the same this year as kind of a disappointment. I didn't expect them to perform well at all. Their offensive line is bottom 5 in the NFL. They have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Their secondary is all banged up. Hunter Renfrow on offense at receiver didn't play last week because of a concussion. He has not practiced yet this week. He may be out. Derek Carr's not playing well. They're not getting the ball to Davante Adams. I don't see why. Honestly, I don't see why the Raiders should be favored here at all. I have this more as a pick'em. The Broncos, I know, look bad, and probably that's the reason why people want to fade Nathaniel Hackett and what they've seen in recent weeks, but they still are, in my metrics, they're 14th in net success rate in the NFL. They're third in my, I have a custom drive metric that I use. They're third in the NFL in a net drive success rate metric. The Raiders are 26th in net success rate and 11th in my net drive success metric. So I have the Broncos as the better team. They actually, as bad as they looked last week, they faced maybe the best defense in the NFL in the Niners. So you're going to look bad on national TV against that defense. The Raiders are a completely different animal. In week 1, the Broncos realistically should have blown out Seattle. I actually had Seattle in that game and was lucky, thanking my lucky stars, that the Denver fumbled twice inside the 5-yard line and botched. Obviously, we all know about how Nathaniel Hackett botched the red zone and kind of any sort of field goal attempt at the end. So otherwise they put up 7 yards per play. One of the best performances of any offense in the NFL all season on yards per play metric. They're getting healthier with Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler getting another week of health. Patrick Surtain, I think, can slow down Davante Adams. And I'm not sure if Hunter Renfrow doesn't play, there's not as many weapons to really attack this really good, top 5 defense at this point. So long story short, I don't, I know you said they're desperate. There's really no historical precedent of a team that's 0-3 against the spread. They're about, essentially 500 in week 4 when you look historically. So it's not like there's any major trend out there that these teams that are desperate and are 0-3 against the spread, really should be winning here. So again, maybe I'm on an island here with Denver, but I think as long as Russell Wilson, uses his legs a little bit more like he did late in last week's game, I think the offense can score some points against his bad defense. So I do like Denver here.
We're going to finish it off today with a little bit of Sunday night football, but different line of questioning. But just for the folks out there, the market is coming in on the Bucs for Sunday night football. The line shortened from Chiefs -2.5 all the way down to -1 at some spots. But what I really want to focus on here is that this game could be moved due to Hurricane Ian. So can you touch on the importance of just knowing your sportsbook's house rules and how that could impact your bet if you do make a wager on Sunday night football?
Yeah, we don't know. Obviously, we make sure everyone is okay down in southern Florida. I actually have family down there, so there's a lot going on and terrible flooding, and a lot of people don't have power. So, yeah, we have no idea if they're actually going to play this game on Sunday, if it's going to be in Tampa, or I heard it could be in Minnesota. There's so many moving parts. Like I personally have no interest in taking anything in this game yet, just because I'd rather have some level of information that we know for sure. For both sides here, but yeah, some books, check with your sports book to see if a game is moved or if it played on a different date or different location. Some bets get voided, so make sure you do take a look at what your house rules are there, because if you do have if you have one of these teams as a teaser leg, that could void your bet. So make sure you take a look at that. I personally would just wait. I have no idea why this line is moving one way or another. I don't know. It's moving towards Tampa, which means do people think that it's likelier that they're going to play in Tampa? I don't know how you make that case right now. So just a lot of information that we still have to clear up first before we take a look at this game. And we still, even with the injury report, just separate from all that, the Tampa injury report, they were so beat up last week. We saw what happened against the Packers. They could barely move the ball. We don't know if Donovan Smith at left tackle is going to play. Obviously Mike Evans is back. We don't know if Julio Jones is going to play. So a lot of question marks in that regard. So just a lot of variables between just the on the field, off the field. And again, make sure you check with your sports book to see, what the rules are in regards to if this game gets moved and different time and location and what happens there.
TA, thanks so much for joining us today and giving us insight into all of these different games. Before we wrap it up, Eli, do you have any final parting words?
Yeah, go follow Cleve TA on Twitter, one of the best football minds out there, and be sure to check out the rest of our NFL content from this week. I got my betting guide up, 3 games bet, over at TheLines.com, so check that out, and also go listen to our Tuesday episode with our buddy and our colleague Monowara.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Remember to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to the Beat the Closing Line podcast on Apple and anywhere else that you get your podcasts. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. If you are betting this week, good luck, and we will see you on Tuesday.